Why did Xerxes, the great Persian emperor, order the extermination of all Jews? Was there a secret conspiracy, a power play behind palace doors? And where was God in all this? Get ready to dive into one of the most intriguing and dramatic stories of the Old Testament. Together we'll uncover why such a powerful king made such a devastating decision. But before we reach the climax, have you ever stopped to think how a single person can change the fate of an entire nation? Stay with us, because what we will discover might change your view on faith, courage, and destiny. The Persian Empire, under the reign of Xerxes I, was a vast and diverse entity, stretching from India to Egypt. Governing such a wide area required skilled administration and a deep understanding of the various cultures, religions, and traditions of the subjugated peoples. The empire was made up of a myriad of ethnicities, each with its own languages, customs, and religious practices. However, this diversity also brought significant challenges, particularly in terms of social cohesion and political stability. Xerxes, like many of his predecessors and successors, needed to balance the demands of a centralized government with local autonomy to maintain peace and order. Ethnic and religious tensions were a constant reality in the Persian Empire. Minority groups often felt oppressed or marginalized, leading to internal conflicts. Additionally, the Persian policy of religious tolerance, although advanced in many respects for the time, was not absolute. Certain groups, depending on their relations with the central administration, could face discrimination or persecution. The Jews, for instance, had an ambiguous position within the empire. While some held high positions and lived relatively secure lives, others were targets of hostility and prejudice. Xerxes' reign was marked by several wars and revolts, both internal and external. The failed invasion of Greece was a major blow to the empire, draining resources and morale. Internally, revolts in provinces like Babylon showed the fragility of Persian control over its vast lands. In this tumultuous context, Xerxes' court was a place of intrigue and political maneuvering, where influential figures like Haman could rise to power and influence the king's decisions. Haman the Agagite is an intriguing figure in Xerxes' court. His rise to power was not accidental, but the result of a combination of political skill and strategic manipulation. Haman managed to gain the king's trust and became one of Xerxes' chief advisors. His influence at court was such that he could issue decrees in the king's name and had the authority to implement policies affecting the entire empire. This position of power was essential for him, as it allowed him to pursue his personal and political goals. Haman's personal motives for hating the Jews, and specifically Mordecai, are multifaceted. There is a suggestion that his animosity could have historical roots related to the ancient hostility between the Agagites and the Israelites. However, it is clear that Haman's disdain for Mordecai was exacerbated by the latter's refusal to bow down to him. For Haman, this refusal was a personal insult that could not be ignored. Furthermore, he saw Mordecai as a representative of the Jews, and his desire for revenge extended to the entire Jewish people. Haman's animosity was not just personal, but also had cultural and religious connotations. He viewed the Jews as a cohesive and distinct group within the empire, with their own laws and customs that separated them from the Persians and other ethnicities. For Haman, this separation was a threat to the unity and authority of the empire. By instigating the decree against the Jews, Haman was not only seeking personal revenge, but also trying to eliminate a group he saw as an obstacle to his vision of a unified and homogeneous empire. Mordecai's refusal to bow to Haman is an emblematic episode that triggered a series of tragic events. As a devout Jew, Mordecai likely saw the demand to bow as a violation of his religious principles. In Judaism, bowing was an act reserved for God, and doing so before a man, especially someone like Haman, could be seen as idolatry. Therefore, this refusal was not just an act of civil disobedience, but a declaration of faith and identity. Haman's interpretation of Mordecai's refusal was immediate and intense. He saw it as disrespect not only to him personally, but also to his position and authority within the empire. For Haman, Mordecai's action was a direct challenge to the established order and an affront that could not be tolerated. This fueled his hatred and desire for revenge even further, leading him to devise a plan to punish not only Mordecai, but also to exterminate the entire Jewish people. The repercussions of Mordecai's refusal were profound and far-reaching. It highlighted the tensions between the different communities within the empire and the fragility of coexistence among diverse groups. Mordecai's action served as a catalyst for the large-scale persecution of the Jews, showing how a single act of resistance can have vast and unexpected consequences. This episode also underscored Mordecai's courage and steadfastness in upholding his convictions despite the threats and imminent danger. With his position of trust with Xerxes, Haman used cunning and persuasion to convince the king to issue a decree against the Jews. He portrayed the Jews as a scattered and distinct people whose laws and practices were different from all other nations in the empire. Haman argued that this distinction made the Jews a threat to the unity and security of the empire. He suggested that if the king allowed them to continue, it could lead to widespread disorder and insubordination. Xerxes, perhaps without fully understanding the decree's implications, was swayed by Haman's rhetoric and the promise of a large sum of silver for the royal treasury. Haman offered 10,000 talents of silver, a huge amount, to be deposited in the king's coffers as an additional incentive to approve the decree. Xerxes, trusting his advisor, authorized the issuance of the decree without questioning the underlying motives or the potential consequences for the empire as a whole. The royal decree, once issued, ordered the annihilation of all Jews, young and old, women and children, in a single day. This order was sent to all provinces of the empire, causing panic and despair among Jewish communities. Haman's justification for this extreme measure was that the Jews were a threat to the empire's well-being, a narrative he carefully constructed to mask his personal motives and specific animosity toward Mordecai and the Jews. The manipulation of Xerxes by Haman is a clear example of how power can be misused and how trust can be betrayed with devastating consequences. Esther and Mordecai's reaction to the decree was immediate and intense. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. This act of public mourning and protest caught Esther's attention, who was initially unaware of the decree. Mordecai sent a copy of the decree to Esther and asked her to intercede with the king on behalf of her people. Esther, in turn, faced a dilemma. Although she was queen, approaching the king without being summoned could result in her death, according to Persian law. However, after a tense dialogue with Mordecai, she decided to risk her life for the sake of her people. Esther asked Mordecai to gather all the Jews in Susa to fast for 3 days and nights, during which she and her maids would also fast. This period of fasting and prayer aimed to seek divine intervention and strengthen Esther for the daunting task ahead. Esther presented herself to the king, and fortunately Xerxes extended the gold scepter to her, signaling that she could approach. Esther, showing great diplomatic skill, invited the king and Haman to a banquet. During the second banquet, she revealed her Jewish identity and exposed Haman's plot to exterminate her people. Esther's courage and wisdom were crucial in reversing the decree and saving the Jews from annihilation. When Esther revealed her Jewish identity and the dangers her people faced, she not only surprised Xerxes, but also put Haman in an extremely vulnerable position. Xerxes, upon realizing the gravity of the situation and Haman's betrayal, became furious. The queen, with a mix of courage and cunning, managed to make Xerxes see the injustice of the decree and Haman's villainy. Before proceeding with the outcome and reversal of the decree, it's important to understand the crucial role that religious and community practices played in this process. When Esther asked Mordecai to call for a 3-day fast, she was appealing to a deeply rooted practice in Jewish tradition. Fasting, accompanied by prayers, was a way to seek mercy and divine intervention in times of great crisis. This collective act of devotion not only strengthened the faith and hope of the Jews, but also united the community with a common purpose. Feasts and fasts were not just religious acts, but also served as moments of reflection and strengthening of community identity. In times of persecution, these practices helped maintain social cohesion and resilience. The 3-day fast called by Esther had a dual purpose, spiritual and strategic. Spiritually, it sought divine protection and guidance. Strategically, it gave Esther time to prepare her plan and gain the necessary confidence to face the king. After Esther's revelation, Xerxes left the banquet in fury and went to the palace garden to reflect. Haman, realizing his life was in danger, stayed to beg Esther for his life. At that moment, Xerxes returned and saw Haman fallen on the couch, where Esther was reclining, interpreting this as an attempt of assault or harassment. This only increased the king's anger. Harbona, one of the eunuchs present, informed the king about the gallows Haman had prepared for Mordecai. Xerxes then ordered Haman to be hanged on that same gallows. Haman's death, however, did not automatically annul the decree he had instigated. According to Persian law, a royal decree sealed with the king's ring could not be revoked. However, Esther and Mordecai didn't give up. Mordecai was elevated to a position of great influence at court, receiving the signet ring that had previously belonged to Haman. With this new authority, he and Esther worked together to find a solution. The solution came in the form of a new decree, allowing the Jews throughout the empire to defend themselves against any attack. This new decree was sent to all the provinces, just like the previous one, and the Jews prepared for the day marked for their destruction. When the day came, the Jews united and successfully defended themselves, defeating their enemies and ensuring their survival. The Jews' victory over their enemies led to the institution of a new festival known as Purim. Purim, meaning lots in Persian, reflects the lot Haman had cast to determine the day of the Jews' destruction. The celebration of Purim is marked by joy, feasting, exchanging gifts, and giving to the needy. It is a time to remember divine providence and the courage of Esther and Mordecai. Purim is a festival that celebrates the complete reversal of fate. What should have been a day of mourning and destruction became a day of triumph and joy. The story of Esther is read in synagogues, and there is an atmosphere of celebration and gratitude. During the reading, every time Haman's name is mentioned, it is customary to make noise to drown out his name and remember his villainy. The story of Esther and Mordecai is rich in lessons about courage, faith, and the importance of community identity. It shows how individuals, even in seemingly vulnerable positions, can make a significant difference when they act with integrity and wisdom. Esther with her courage and Mordecai with his steadfastness are examples of moral leadership and resistance in the face of adversity. Additionally, the narrative highlights the complexity of power and politics in the Persian court. Haman, with his ambition and manipulation, managed to rise to power, but his fall was equally swift and dramatic. Xerxes, in turn, is portrayed as an impressionable king whose decisions are shaped by those he trusts. This dynamic of power and influence is a reminder of how justice and injustice can prevail depending on who holds power and how it is used. The celebration of Purim, therefore, is not just a commemoration of the Jews' physical survival, but also a testament to spiritual and moral resilience. It is an affirmation that even in times of great danger, faith and courage can lead to salvation and renewal. And if you were in Xerxes' place, how would you act? Would you have the courage to question your advisors, or would you simply go with the flow, fearful of losing power and control. The story of Esther teaches us about courage, faith, and the importance of standing up against injustice. And you, are you ready to be a voice for change in your own context? Are you ready to question and act with justice and compassion? Let's continue exploring and learning together here on Words of Maranatha. In the coming videos, we'll delve even deeper into fascinating stories and powerful lessons the Bible offers us. So, get ready, because this journey is just beginning. Until next time, and may God bless each one of you.